So we're going to start the conversation. So hi everyone, I am Gary Clarke and I am the artistic director of Gary Clarke Company, and welcome to this In Conversation event. This In Conversation is the end of a week which has been focusing on solo practice. So on Monday we looked at my autobiographical solo work Horse Meat. On Tuesday, we looked at a solo called Cameo Cookie, made for dancer Eleanor Perry. And then Wednesday, we looked at a piece called Bagofte, which was made for Gavin Coward. And I really wanted to try and investigate more about this notion of solo practice and solo work. So I've invited the brilliant Hetain Patel with us this evening to try and unpick some of the notions of solo work and solo practice. So just to give you a quick introduction, this is Hetain. Just give us a wave.
Hi, thanks for having me, Gary.
And also we've got Freya with us from Hans de Kretzer Associates in London, who do a lot of Gary Clarke Company's digital and marketing.
Hi, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I'm just going to quickly, before Gary takes over with the conversation, I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping. If everyone could just make sure they've muted themselves during the conversation, just so that we don't get any sound interference, that would be really great. And during the conversation, we're going to take some breaks in between Gary and Hetain's chat. And so if you could please just put any questions or anything you'd like to ask either of them in the question box or in the comment box. I'll be collating all of them, and then we'll take some breaks during the conversation to put them to Gary and Hetain. So yeah, have a lovely evening, and I'm going to mute and take myself off the screen now.
Great, thanks Freya.
No problem.
She's gone. There she is, she's gone. Great, it's just me and you now, Hetain, and the rest of
Okie doke, yeah.
I'm just going to do a really embarrassing thing and just introduce you quite formally, if that's all right.
Okay, I'll sit here awkwardly while you do that.
All right then, so great. Hetain Patel is an artist based in London who straddles the areas of live art, sculpture, performance, video work and photography, amongst others. And he's no stranger to solo practice, so he seemed the perfect fit for this In Conversation event.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. Thanks for keeping it nice and short. I hate when there's like massive things that kind of get read and you kind of, I don't know, they're so weird, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, now we're just going to show a little clip of your work. So for people that might not necessarily be familiar with your work, we're going to show a little clip from your YouTube channel with more information. So Freya, when you're ready, let's hit play. Freya, it's muted, I think.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Right. Hello, hi. I'm Hetain and welcome to my kitchen and YouTube channel. I'm an artist and I do stuff like this. Mainly though, I sit here in my kitchen a lot, trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to do all of that. So this YouTube channel will show you a few time-lapse videos, a few behind the scenes and trailers, but also more important things like how-to videos on how to make a proper cup of tea or how to speak proper English. So have a click around. If you like what you see, then remember to subscribe and hopefully see you back here soon. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Freya. Well, that was fun.
Yeah.
So how do you make a proper cup of tea?
There was a series of videos that I'd made on YouTube that were kind of tongue-in-cheek around the how-to series of videos. So it's how to make a cup of tea, it's how to make a proper cup of tea, how to sing like a man, how to sing like a real man, and so on. And they're all kind of set up to be the kind of YouTube videos that you find about this sort of stuff. But I guess turn on the head a bit, and they talk about race and identity and stuff like that, using the humor of those sort of videos.
Nice, lovely. I'll make sure to watch that if I can.
Yeah.
So before we start looking at solo practice and what the hell that means, I just wonder whether you could take us right back to the beginning, because I'm always very intrigued about how artists and makers and creators find themselves in the industry. So what was your path? So take us right back to when you were a child and how you've stumbled across this.
Well, as a kid, my way into the arts, I guess, is through drawing. You know, it was always the thing at school that I was the best at. You know, I was so, you know, it made me feel special, and you know, I loved doing it and kept it up, and that's how it went through school, basically. You know, if you're a very quiet kid, so drawing was my thing, and eventually painting. And then I guess I did art at GCSE and A level, and then from then I did an art foundation course, a visual art foundation course, on which you do design, fine art, and graphics and that sort of thing. And then I went to Nottingham Trent and did a fine art degree, and graduated there 2003, and then was just making work as an artist since then, really. Mainly photography back then, eventually video works, and then the performance side of things didn't really, well, no, I guess early-ish on, within a few years into my practice, the performance stuff I was doing, all of it solo, was gallery performances, all of which were durational in nature. So 4, 5, 6 hours. They did a couple that were 12 hours long. And in terms of moving into the performing arts context, it was a kind of a weird way into that, I guess. I think probably 2008, 2009, I was doing a best man speech for a mate who's getting married, and it was interrace marriage, and so a lot of the jokes were about, you know, what my practice is about, I guess. And I really enjoyed doing it. You know, I had a sort of surprised myself, you know, up with a mic and enjoying it, performing, I guess. And so that gave me a bit of a seed, a bug. And then at about that time, I was making a performance for a gallery, and so I started incorporating spoken parts in that, and then via I guess part professional development or residency that I did through Dance 4 in Nottingham, that kind of supported and injected a different kind of experience to performance outside of the visual arts. You know, I'd never really had any contact with theatre or dance or music or anything before then. And so I was sort of developing my first live work from then, I guess. That was probably 2009, which... and then what happened was that work, I submitted it, a work in progress, to the Arts Council Decibel Showcase, which was a performing arts showcase for Black, Asian, minority artists. And I wasn't interested in the performing arts, if I'm honest. It was just because there was a fee attached to it. And, you know, I needed the cash. And so, you know, thought, you know, give it a try, and, you know, and then luckily at that showcase, the show got picked up, and there was a lot of interest, and I started getting support, and that support really from the contemporary dance world allowed me, or created space for me to start thinking about performance in a different way, or for a different context. And so from then, I guess the performance side of things started to go alongside my visual arts practice.
Wow. So you've gone on a real journey then in terms of how much it's kind of expanded.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have ever imagined doing performance, to be honest. You know, when I was at uni doing photographs, they were still self-portraits, and looking back on them, they were quite performative in that I used to decorate my own body in pigments and photograph myself.
Yeah.
And my tutors would always say, you know, you should make these into videos, or you know, and live performance. And I hated that idea. I was like, no. My practice is photography. You know, I didn't touch video till after I graduated, and then live performance came after that, really.
Yeah.
And so it was a funny way into it, if you like, because when I started doing live performance in a gallery, eventually it didn't feel right, because I was on my own. I was marking my own body, and you know, I guess with galleries typically being white middle class spaces, being this brown lad in the middle of the gallery putting, you know, pigments on himself, I felt like I was really self-exoticizing myself.
Wow.
And I felt really like an object. And so that wasn't really sitting right with me.
Right.
And so I'm only now going back into gallery performance more recently, having gone through a long period of mainly performing in theatres, and things felt different there for me somehow.
Yeah, of course. And you've touched on this slightly, but when you were training when you were younger, you mentioned earlier that it was instilled in your learning about solo practice, about working alone, which is very, very different to, you know, what we do as choreographers and as dancers. We're very much surrounded by people all the time, and interaction is very much part of our practice. But you were saying before that it's been very different for you, and that being solo is something that has been with you for quite a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I guess typically in the visual arts, you're taught to have a solo practice by default, really. I don't feel like it's ever sort of discussed in that way as a choice. I think there still exists this romantic notion of the solo genius artist, you know, and even though they don't talk about it that way, that's the ecology of it, the culture of it. So, you know, even if you think of the bigger name, you know, famous rich artists, then when they have assistants and whatever to make the works, they never refer to those people as collaborators. They're never really mentioned as technicians. You know, they're the fabricators of the work. You know, the artist has the idea, and the fabricators make it, if you like. And so I feel like inherently it's not taught as being a collaborative art form necessarily. And of course, there's lots of ways that it is, but I just mean like the predominant way that it's taught, if you like. You kind of, it's sort of sold as a solo practice without talking about it as such somehow.
Yeah. So if you had to define yourself in a way, would you call yourself a solo artist? And then how do you define that?
Do you know what? I've never thought of it that way. I call myself an artist, and sometimes it involves solo practice, and sometimes it involves very collaborative practice. You know, I couldn't. Yeah, it's kind of.
I guess I'm trying to get to to maybe get to the bones of this idea of what makes a solo artist rather than just making a solo. Because I know when I created Horse Meat, which lasted for about 2 years, I very much made it on myself for myself, but I wouldn't have called myself a solo practitioner. I think I was a choreographer that made a solo.
And when you were making that, were you working on your own?
Predominantly, yes. And then I invited some people in. I got 2 mentors. I got Javier de Frutos and the brilliant late Nigel Charnock, who, without them, I wouldn't have done anything. I found creating the solo work incredibly hard because of the amount of discipline and focus that you needed and rigor. I just, it almost disabled me. I couldn't get past the first hurdle. But as soon as I had other people in the room, it no longer felt like a solo anymore. And I just, actually, I'm not a solo artist. I'm not actually good by myself. And I think it takes a certain kind of an artist to be able to do that time and time again.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I see the angle you say now. Yeah, I think probably then I spend most of the time on my own in my practice, I would say. And, you know, in terms of developing works, the concept and the idea, I spend a lot of time with that on my own first, before I've kind of invite conversations with potential collaborators. And then it's important to have those collaborators in, but in a way, I always need to know why I'm doing something, or at least have a strong enough impetus or instinct towards something first before I invite other voices in, because my tendency is to value other people's opinion, I guess, especially people bringing in. So when there's other people there, you know, typically they'll be saying and thinking things which I really respect and admire and that interest me, but I'm just kind of fighting my pleasing people insides by trying to figure out what I feel about this stuff first.
Yeah.
And you know, where my basing is before the collaborators come in, but I keep veering off. So the solo aspect is probably in the concept and the ideas, and then often there's collaborators brought in which greatly enrich the work. And then, but even when the collaborations go in, I still go back to solo periods, and sort of check in with myself and that sort of thing, I think.
And with these collaborations, and you can be really honest now, how are you at taking those feedbacks and those points of view? Because obviously everyone's going to have an opinion. You know, what's that like?
It's challenging, you know, but I mean, it's really important to me that it's there, you know, and it's really important to me that people that I'm working with, they're in the room with me or in project with me, feel comfortable enough to say the truth about, because often it's not necessarily just about people working on a project with and for me. Quite often we might go closely into things that are personal to my collaborators.
Yeah.
You know, it might be their identities that we're looking at or their backgrounds. And so, you know, it's deeply important that they feel comfortable and have an ownership of what's going on. You know, I think that's the trust that we build in the process. And then even outside of that, even when it's not people's identities, if it's a light designer or something like that, you know, I invite all of that in. And sometimes even when I don't invite it, I don't know if you find it comes anyway. You know, people.
Of course it does. People like.
But in a way, I like that. In a way, I feel like if people give their input anyway, I feel success in a way that I feel like I've created an environment where people don't feel like they need to stay in their lane. You know, my light designer, I work with Jackie Shemesh. It's not unusual for him to kind of give notes on the dramaturgy or on something else, and I really like that. You know, it's kind of it's a human thing, but I find it's a personal thing, and it depends on how much energy you've got at different times. But it sort of have to balance this of how much you're inviting and taking, and then sort of pausing and pulling back to process all of that into the direction that it needs to go, sort of thing, or that I feel it needs to go. So it feels like a constant negotiation with that, if you like. But yeah, I really value it, to be honest. I feel like it's just I think it's part of the core ethics of what I believe in. I think just about life, let alone, you know, not even necessarily about artwork really. So it's important to me that mechanism is also in my work.
And how do you get a perspective on what it is you are making and creating, because I think what I've struggled with, and I think a lot of people that are creating solo work struggle with, is getting perspective on what you're doing without too much influence from the outside. And I found that really hard. It's if I was creating or generating material, it was really difficult for me to understand what I was doing and what it looked like and how it was being presented and represented. So there was a huge conflict going on within me that I couldn't quite grasp. And then the minute that I handed the solo over to another performer, I could clearly see what it needed and I could clearly see what it was. And then I could shape it and craft it into a piece of work. So do you have any strategies about how do you get around that? How do you do that?
Well, for a long time, I was performing in my own work, and I still do now, but not exclusively. And I think I was quite lucky in a way, in the sense that the way it happened for me is early on. I remember seeing a performance by Gabby Reuter in Nottingham, and as part of Knock Dance. And I noticed on the credits, and I loved the performance, and I noticed on the credits that someone that I knew, Michael Pinchbeck, was down as dramaturg, and I'd never seen that word before. So I went and asked him, what's a dramaturg? And he sort of took me through that a bit, and I was like, oh, I'd like one of them, you know. And you know, I was in the really early stages of my work, if you like, starting live work. And then so I was lucky in the sense that from the start I was aware of this idea of an outside eye in all of its, you know, gloriousness. And so through my performance practice, both through Michael Pinchbeck and Eva Martinez, my wife, I've had the support of both of them with a dramaturgical eye. And so when I'm in my work, I found that absolutely invaluable. And I just know that it would have been impossible for my work to become what they are without that. You know, I still remember a particular time being in the studio with Eva and showing, you know, a work in progress of a piece. And I can't remember what the feedback was, but it was something like, I didn't understand any of that last bit. Like, what the hell is going on? You know, and I was like, oh, I thought it was really clear. And so even just having something as simple as that of being able to have a discussion about intention, and I found it, I feel like it's such an important role that someone could hold for you. They sort of take things off your shoulders, if you like, and it's such an intimate relationship. They get to know you in your practice. And so, you know, the idea is that they help you bring out what you want to bring out. Like you'd mentioned in a conversation you and I have had before, Gary, that when you were making something really personal, and if you're on stage and you sort of, you know, putting your heart out and emotionally it takes a lot from you. If it doesn't communicate to the audience, it's really heartbreaking. It's like, it feels like almost for nothing that you're kind of going through all of that. So in a way, the dramaturg's role for me is to make sure that your intention hits the audience, if you like. So I think that's the biggest thing that had impact for me, or strategy, if you like, when I was making work as a performer myself.
So in a way, what you're highlighting there is the importance of other people in the room, and that just when we talk about solo practice, it doesn't necessarily just mean you alone by yourself. That actually support from the outside is really important.
Absolutely, yeah. That's bang on, really. And to be fair, I think it's the same for visual arts practice. And even though you can I think what happens more often than not is that feedback doesn't happen. You know, and people put work out there, and you know.
And how do you feel about trust then with that? Is it important for you that you trust the people in the room with you? Because obviously you're creating something very, but like you say, it's personal. You know, and I guess you need somebody in the room that you can trust.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, like you said yourself, it's so personal. When you're making your best work, I feel like you're at your most vulnerable, And so, you know, in order to really get somewhere, you're in a place that is very vulnerable. And so you need people in your team on your side, even if it's just one person, who can kind of care for you and hold you, you know, kind of in that place, if you like, and be aware, I think.
Yeah, I think it's same for me as well. Not even just making solo work, but when I create bigger work, I like to have people around me to help give me that support. And sometimes they're just a shoulder to cry on, aren't they? Or,
Yeah.
and
it feels human somehow. Like, it's, you know, if just in, you know, day-to-day life, if we try to take something on our own, that's deeply personal and it takes a lot from us. You know, if we try to do it on our own, most often than not, we'll end up depressed, or, you know, or banging our head against the wall. You know, once you involve a mate or a family member or a neighbor or something, then suddenly it becomes lighter, it becomes easier, doesn't it?
It's a shared experience, I think, rather than it just being solo practice, as it were.
Exactly. And it's like, I think people worry sometimes about, if we involve other people, that the voice will get watered down, or that it'll become less personal. And I think that can be a danger sometimes, you know, if there's too many cooks, the saying. But I think a lot of the time, I think it's easy for the artist to forget that it can never become less personal, or like, it's, you know, if you're creating it from that place, even having collaborators in there, it's still, the Eunice is still going to come through, I think.
Yeah. Great. We'll take a little pause there and get some questions maybe from Freya in a second. And then what I'd like to do, we're going to start to just dissect a little bit of processes and strategies, which I think is important when making work, is how we survive through the process and how to keep going.
Yeah, and that we've all got strategies and need them.
And especially now during this COVID time, you know, we're also kind of solo at the minute. So, yeah, we'll talk a bit about that. Freya, do you have any questions?
Yes, so we've got a couple of questions. The first question is from Tiffany, and that is, which do you prefer, solo-focused work or collaborative work?
Is that to me?
Yeah, you go first.
It probably depends on what, I don't know how you feel, Gary, but what phase you're in. But more and more, I prefer the collaborative work, and I think, but it's difficult for me to I guess, as long as we're understanding that collaborative work, I feel, has lots of solo moments in there.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like, you know, if I'm developing projects, I'm still on my own a lot of that time. And then the collaboration adds richness at various points and at kind of later stages somehow. But I think, the collaborative aspect for me feels like I can achieve more. I can achieve a bigger, a wider ambition of kind of the works I want to achieve. How do you find it, Gary?
Oh God, collaboration the whole way. I love creating solo work on others. Personally, I wouldn't ever create a solo again for myself, by myself. I can say that it was a really daunting experience, and I wasn't productive as a choreographer. But to create a solo on a dancer or an actor, I really love that, and that's something I really enjoy. And what I love about solo work is that you can really focus on detail and you can really zone in on that one person. However, that also is a collaborative process. So it's not just me working on that person, but we have a dialogue and we have a conversation, and at the end of it, they would have a solo. And we talk a lot about the difference between a solo and a soloist, and the power of the performer and the responsibility of having to be able to stand, you know, the length of the solo, to be able to sustain it and know how to pitch it. So there's lots and lots of conversations that we have around being alone in the work, but collaboration all the way for me.
Great. So the next question is more specifically to you, Gary, and this is saying from Adam. I know that the title The Gofty came from Wikipedia's description of Bacon's artwork, bold, austere, graphic, and often torturous imagery. Where did the titles Horse Meat and Cameo Cookie come from?
Good question.
Good question. Horse meat, right? This is a so. I was in London in 2005 and I'd gone through quite a bad breakup. So I was heartbroken. I was feeling really sorry for myself. And I had all of these emotions inside me, and I knew that I wanted to try and get them out and exercise them. So I decided there and then I wanted to make a solo. So it was completely self-indulgent. And I guess now looking back, it acted as a form of therapy for me. At the beginning it did, and I remember being out in Soho really late at night and it was raining, and I bought one of those hot dogs from one of those stalls, and I got on the night bus and I was just wet and crying and eating this hot dog, and I picked up a Time Out that was on the seat next to me, and it said, the front cover said the world's worst food, and number one was the London hot dog, which I was about to eat. And I just thought, okay, this is it. And it said the ingredients of it was like rotten horse meat. And it's at that moment I just thought, right, I need to make a solo. So yeah, horse meat came from that, really. Cameo Cookie, I can't actually remember where the title of Cameo Cookie came from. The piece was based on a lady called Anita Bryant, who campaigned in America in the 60s to have down with gay people. She believed that gay people recruited children and corrupted them. So it's based on her life, and the title, like, I honestly cannot remember where Cameo Cookie come from. I need to look that up, actually. I'm so sorry that I haven't got a more succinct answer.
That's okay. Horse meat was a good answer. That was a great answer.
Yeah, I remember it well, that one.
Another question from Patricia. How do you know that an idea is worth exploring or pursuing? So, Hetain, do you maybe want to take?
I think sometimes you don't know until you pursue it. Yeah. You know, I think that, I don't mean that to be a silly answer, but I think I was telling Gary earlier, one of the things at art school that used to happen is used to develop initially your ideas in your sketchbook or your notebook through text, writing, collaging, whatever, and then, you know, the ideas you wanted to follow, then you make them into something, or sculpture or video or photograph, whatever it is. And the thing that the tutors always used to try and get us to do, or bang on about us, is say, you need to get out of your sketchbooks. You know, they used to say, don't kill your ideas in your notebook. And I guess what they meant by that is if you work your ideas through in the notebook, just sort of imagining them, that you would bring them to the logical end and just kill them off and never do them. So they're trying to get us to leave the sketchbook early on in that thinking to start making. And that might, whatever medium it is, with the knowledge that in that making, you might get seduced into the medium, or ideas will come and it will go somewhere, or it will start to wrap around itself and it just die. But that you had to just try it. Yeah. And I think we've just got to be brave and to try your ideas and to feel that you've got multiple ideas in you, and just have faith in that. I think it's kind of, I often find I'm trying and multiple ideas at the same time, and just having a break from, you know, some painters talk about the fact that they make lots of paintings at the same time. So they work on this one for a while, they need a break from it, and they'll work on that one, and then different ones get finished at the same different times. I think it's the same with any ideas, whether it's dance, performance, or whatever medium. I think you can be working on lots of different ones. And if you are working on different ones, then if some die off and they're not worth pursuing any further, it's okay. You know, there's other things going on, or sometimes you might just have the one idea, but if it dies, I think it's about having faith that something else will come.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really good advice. Definitely. So we have another question. Maybe Gary, you want to take this one. This is basically from Tiffany again. She was just saying, do you think the enjoyment of collaborative work comes with maturity in your practice?
For me, it's always been collaborative, and I've always enjoyed collaborating. Even when I was studying at university, it's always been but I think what happens is the collaborations get tighter as you mature, and they just get more deeper. So what I tend to do now is work with the same collaborators for pretty much every project that I do, because we have an understanding. So I think what does mature is the relationship and the understanding of that. So you're always aiming for the same vision. So I think you have to spend a lot of time at the beginning negotiating it and allowing people to understand the work you want to make, the kind of work you want to make, and what the feel of it. So, you know, I've been working with like my lighting designer now for over 12 years, and we just know we're really in sync. So I don't really need to speak to him a lot because he understands what I'm trying to achieve, and that feels like a real treat to be able to build really healthy, strong, creative relationships with people over time. I don't know if it's that same for you, Hetain.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can understand reticence early in the career to collaborate, and I feel like for me, maturity definitely has brought about being able to collaborate much better. And I think part of that for me was definitely early on. I was just so worried about what my voice is. You know, I just didn't know what I thought or what my vision or voice or ideas was. And if I couldn't figure out what I was thinking, I was just so scared that if I bring anyone else into the room, into the thinking, that I would just get confused even more. And so I think as I sort of progressed, I feel like as I got more sense of who I am and what my work is, and more so that as you start to bring collaborators in, I feel like there's nothing that could happen that could make me, I don't know, jolt me off track. And I don't mean in terms of making a piece of work, because, you know, that's what collaboration does. You go different places with your collaborators. But I mean, I feel like it's not like I'm saying I know who I am, but I mean, I feel like I've got a stronger instinct now about what the work is, what it needs to do. And so then the collaboration in that frame of mind can then feel really enriching, because then I feel like you can give yourself to it. And I feel like, you know, you can really be in a place where you can create the conditions for your collaborators to, you know, really go for it as well, knowing that it's not going to kind of cloud you in any way, or, you know, send you to come out in a voice that's not your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of following on from that, there's just been another question that's come through from Nigel Clarke, who says, have you ever had a bad collaborative experience?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think for me personally, because I'm so headstrong with my ideas, I'm quite, even though sometimes I can be unclear, but I know what I don't want, or I know what I want. And sometimes it's just not a successful collaboration because we're coming from two very, very different points. So it's more artistic than it is about being, there's never any tension or any fights, as it were, but just artistically we're not quite matching up. It doesn't quite work. And I've learned, I learned very early on to just acknowledge when that's happening, and then just to say, I think we need to stop, because otherwise the art will get damaged and the artists will get damaged. And then I think that's when things can go terribly wrong. And I've seen that happen to other peers of mine. So it's about recognizing when to put the brakes on, and identifying that now would be a good time to leave the process where it is, because it's just not right. And I think that's fine to do that. And I think that we need to do more of it and not be afraid of acknowledging when things are not going so well. We're just not, I don't think we're very good at that in the arts. We're quite apologetic and just accepting of whatever it is we're going through. So I learned to just be a little bit more clearer about if things are not working. So it has happened, but less and less the more I work, I think.
I mean, it's a really brave thing to do, to do that mid-process. For both or all parties involved, really. I mean, I feel like I'm quite lucky, and I've not had many bad experiences, but I definitely remember one where I was brought into somebody else's project as a collaborator, and in that instant where it wasn't my project, as it started to go bad, we were getting towards the end-ish, and I just kind of just quietened into my hole. And just let it, the show happen. And at the end, then having that conversation, and actually that ended that relationship, actually, which was the right thing. But it's quite different. I'm sure it's probably different also who you are in that collaboration as well, whether you're the director or whether you're someone who's been brought in, or
Okay, they're all the questions we have for the moment, but if anybody has any other questions, please do keep adding them to the chat.
Thank you, Freya. Well, I think there'll be more questions coming, because now I'd like to talk a little bit about process. Well, there's two things really: process and then discipline and strategies. So what does a typical process look like for you, Hetain? How do you begin, and what is the journey to the final product? Is it always the same, or does it differ?
It's definitely not always the same. I mean, for me, the idea always comes first, and that idea can be conceptual, it can be instinctive, it can be in my body, it can be visual, it can be sonically, and then I sort of try to follow my nose with it. And then quite often at the beginning, I'm not sure what the best medium is going to be for the work. So it might be a live performance, it might be a film, it might be a series of photographs. And so sometimes I have to try all of them. And so sometimes I start all of that, start looking into if it would be a live performance, start making some photographs, all those things. And then sometimes some of those things start feeling wrong and they stop, and it just becomes a sculpture or just becomes a live performance, whatever. But sometimes they all feel right and do something else. And so the idea becomes all of these things. And so it might be a video installation for a gallery, and the idea might also go into a live performance for theatre. In terms of process, I feel like the process has often been a bit freer with my visual artwork, simply because of the structure and the mechanics of how dance and theatre works, meaning how the commissioning and the timeline and what the end point is going to be, and the collaborative aspect, and how we make a team and pay for fees and do funding in order to have a rehearsal period, R&D period, and a thingy, performance period. I think a lot of that is led by the economics of it, and the structures of that. Whereas in the visual art world, you do have that to some extent, because you might be working towards a show or an exhibition. But in terms of the process of those making those works, I feel like it's really wide, mainly because a lot of that work is less resource heavy of people. If we're making performance work, we need people, we need a space, we need all this stuff. Whereas in the visual arts, even if I'm making a massive film project, which is actually more collaborators than my live work, those collaborators still don't come in, most of them, towards the end. So a lot of that work can happen in different kind of ways, that doesn't need a space, doesn't necessarily need the resource of people. So I feel like the process is different from idea to finalizing, depending on the medium, probably. But then that medium is led by the idea. It's very rare that I think, I can't ever remember thinking, oh, let's make a sculpture, or let's make a live performance. You know, I don't think I really work that way.
And so going on from that then, how do you, if you're spending a lot of time at the beginning by yourself, you know, how do you stay motivated, disciplined? You know, how do you manage all of that? And, you know, self-doubt, you know, self-criticism. How do you take care of yourself if you're working alone? Because it can be a very lonely space, I would think, if you're spending so much time alone. What do you have systems in place that protect you or help you?
I think one of the best things I learned at art school is self-discipline. You know, I think it's in my nature anyway. But I think one of the things at art school, when you get there, they take you to a space. You go, that's your studio, right? Get on with it. And you go, get on with what? You know, like, you know. And then that's the scary as hell for a long time until you try to figure out how to fill that time. And then at the start, it's about filling time, like a schoolboy. And then it's slowly, it's about trying to switch that space of filling time to only doing the stuff you're obsessed by, and then trying to find the stuff that, what are you obsessed by? And then a lot of the time I feel like we're our own worst enemies, in that the thing that we might be obsessed by, I think, oh no, that wouldn't work for performance or for artwork. Like I did it myself, you know, it took me so many years to let humor into my work, because I would push it aside and say, you know, no, that you won't be taken seriously in the art world. That's not something you can do. And it's only when I started to let that in, you know, not denying who I am, that things changed and it becomes obsessive. So then it started to feel less about a discipline, about getting up and working, and more about trying to find strategies to be honest with yourself about what you actually care about. And not just care about, but that you're obsessed about and can't stop thinking about. And then so I feel like that's the way I, you know, and I'm not saying that's easy to do. You know, we lie to ourselves all the time, you know, but like it's kind of, I feel like that's my way into, that's how I operate in my practice, if you like. And I think, I was saying to you earlier, I find it a bit difficult thinking back to the early days now, because now I think after you get to a certain level of busy, it takes more discipline to stop, and to take a break, to take a holiday, to take a weekend, to take a lunch, than it does to kind of do the work. But I think I feel like if you're struggling and looking for ways to motivate, I feel like it's like about trying to find ways to do what you want to do. Otherwise, why are we in the arts otherwise?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know, how do you find it?
Yeah, exactly the same. I think I like this idea of this notion of being obsessed with stuff, but I do think it's about maturity. I think it's as you get a bit older, it's as you understand your work more. I think like you in the beginning, I didn't really know what my work was about, and I was always influenced by other people's work or choreographers that I'd worked with. It's only since I really started to understand my work when I got older, I'm now confident in what it is I want to say and what it is I want to communicate. But that took a while. That took, you know, a long time. And it's funny because we're talking about solo practice and solo work. And even though I work collaboratively and I'm always surrounded by people, I think directing and choreography can be one of the loneliest places, because it lies within my vision, my brain.
Yeah.
Spent many a night awake, you know, with my art, just trying to figure out the best ways to move forward.
I mean, you know, I wonder if this is one of the things about, you know, the typical thing for a visual artist, they're making stuff, is to not collaborate necessarily. So they're just making stuff and then it comes out in a gallery without necessarily having to be able to talk about it. Or explain or whatever. Whereas in collaborative work, particularly live work, you can't do that, because with your collaborators, you have to be able to try to find a way to communicate with people before you even meet an audience. It's kind of, and like you say, when it's in your head and there's instinctive emotional stuff in there, and when you're in the thick of it, I think that's quite challenging sometimes to be able to communicate to your collaborators, you know, what's in the head.
And how do you deal with self-doubt, or do you have it? Like this, you know, we get the little voices. As artists, we're renowned for having it, aren't we? We're renowned for being our own martyrs. We're renowned for having constant insecurities and self-doubt. You know, for someone that works alone quite a bit, how do you overcome that? Or do you have it even?
Absolutely. I can't imagine. I couldn't imagine being in a creative field if you didn't have self-doubt. I personally think you're not doing it honestly enough if you don't have self-doubt. But I think probably, I think I'm in a fortunate position where I'm able to share and show work quite often, and for it to be engaged with. So exhibitions, performances, typically. But even if not, you know, I guess we have social media, and I might try something and get stuff like that. So I think when I start to get interaction with people with the work, I think sometimes that helps a bit, because, you know, they're not necessarily saying the things that I'm telling myself about the work. You know, this is cracks of that or whatever. So I think it's about trying to be brave and kind of get it out there. I think that's the way I find. I think. I mean, it's a really good question. And sometimes I wouldn't say I overcome it at all times, if I'm honest. You know, it's like there's probably some works, big or small, that I haven't made because the self-doubt has won. And, you know, it just stays in the notebook, or it stays in the memory bank or something, and it'll either stay there forever, or sometimes it comes out later.
Or it might even change its form somehow.
Yeah.
It just manifests itself into something other or different.
Exactly. So I think for me, it's the important thing is that acknowledging that the self-doubt doesn't always get defeated. No matter how long we're doing it somehow, and I feel like I'm better at defeating it now, but by no means do I win every time.
And would you say that, especially some of your solo work, that the constant work in development, because it's solo? I just know when I made Horse Meat, it was over about 2 years, but I did like a small scratch version. Then I showed it to an audience, got some feedback, developed it, did that again. For almost 2 years, it just grew and grew and grew. But I know some people just like to put work out there and then it's done and dusted. How does that fit for you?
I think I go on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
I try to feel live about everything. So, you know, if you know, certain pieces might never be performed again, and they might be to do with finances and funding, or sometimes it's to do, you feel like that served its purpose, it worked at that time, it wouldn't work now. And I feel things happen differently for different pieces. So there is live work that I've made, you know, 6 years ago. I was just performing something last night actually, which had elements in there which was created in 2014. Whereas the stuff I've made since then, 2016, 17, which I don't think I would show now. So it's not to do with chronology, I feel. So it's not like the further away I've made something, the less likely I'll show it now. It's got nothing to do with time for me. It's to do with what the work is, and trying to keep a feel of what still feels right, or, you know, that you want to be showing.
And is there any, in terms of learning, because we learn a lot, don't we, as we make work, is there one thing that you would avoid for anyone listening that might be interested in making solo work or interested in developing work? You know, is there anything that you just think, actually, that I could have done that differently, or I wish I'd have I should have tried that different, or I'm going to avoid that next time. Any sticking points that you can think of that?
I think not to do it alone. And you know, and not just that, even if you only have one person, that person should be a cheerleader. You know, it's the person you want, or the team you want, someone in there has got to be the person who's cheering you on, who's like who's there to kind of tell you, no, all your ideas are not crap, or you know, you don't look like an idiot doing that. You know what I mean? And I think the way you want the kind of person who, you know, when you put yourself in that position, you know what it's like, don't you? If you're somebody else's support mechanism or cheerleader, you know the feeling you have when they have self-doubt, and how you want to be for them and support them. And so really you need to, as much as you feel caring and want to support about that person, you need to allow somebody to do that for you.
Nice. Lovely. Okay, Freya, we've got time for just a few more questions if there's any come in, and then time is ticking, so we might have to we'll leave it there if there's any.
So we haven't had any more questions come in, but something that I was thinking about when you both were talking, you've both kind of spoke about how you share your work with different people, and I just wondered, when you are creating a solo piece of work, at what stage do you feel like is the right time to share that with someone, to get their opinion on it? And who do you share it with? Do you share it with like friends, family, or do you share it with, you know, people who might have a more kind of critical approach? Where do you go to for that?
Me personally, yeah, like I said, I think it's a case by case, I think, and I like to get some feedback at the very beginning of what I'm doing, just to see if there's any mileage in it. So I like to show things very early on, just to see what it tastes like for people. And I always create work with an audience in mind. So for me, it's really important to get people in the room along the process, not just at the very beginning, but as we go along. And I like to get a real mix of people. I tend to get people in that don't really know much about dance or choreography. People like my family, my mum, because they're the most critical, and they, you know, if it doesn't work for them, then there's no point doing it, really. As well as, you know, some of my peers and other choreographers and people that work in the arts. So I try and get a real wide range of stuff. What that means is that the work hopefully is suitable for all. So you don't have to, you know, work or understand the art world to get it. I like to create work for people. So yeah, a whole range of mix of people all along the way, right from the very beginning stages right through to the very end.
So how early is early, Gary?
Sometimes it could be within a week. Like I might just tinker around for like 5 days and then just go, right, can someone just have a look at this? Because I don't really know what I'm seeing or whether it's going to work. And then all I need sometimes is a thumbs up and go, oh yeah, actually. And then I go, right, fine. And then I run with it. So yeah, it can be really early on.
Nice. I think you're definitely much braver than me in terms of getting lots of people in at early stage. I feel like I wouldn't say I get people in that early, actually. I feel like I need to have a feel of something a bit stronger for myself before I do. And then actually it's ever that with everything that I bring in, usually just her to start with, actually. And obviously because we're married, it's often in an informal capacity. And then it's usually collaborators who are a part of that. For me, it's probably a while till I test it with an audience. I'm probably too scared to kind of bring people in at an early stage. Probably at a more typical work in progress stage, I'll probably bring an audience in, which would be a wider range of people, I guess.
I think something that's just struck me was when we made Cole, which dealt with a miners' strike, and it dealt with people's personal stories. And I think with something like the miners' strike, you've got to get it right. I think it's so politically ingrained in this country that I had to get it right.
Yeah.
So I knew early on that what I needed to do was bring in some of those people that had been affected by the strike, because otherwise it would have been too late. If suddenly I got to a point where we'd only got a few weeks left or it was about to go on stage. And so I got them in quite early on in the process for them to give feedback, and they did. And that was that really then helped me. I almost changed tact when they gave me that feedback. I thought, actually, I'm slightly doing this the wrong way, or I'm not approaching it right, or I didn't have the right kind of glasses on. But only by speaking to them and them seeing what I was doing, I was able to then do that. And then I had enough time to be able to change it and better it. And I'm so glad that I did that, to just honour the work, really, and honour the subject matter.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. We have one more question from Elaine. So where's the line between working with people who you trust and connect with and becoming too comfortable? Do you see working with new people as scary?
I'm not sure about in thinking about too comfortable or new people, I think it's important to ask yourself, why? What's the reason you're continuing working with people? And if it's something that's nourishing and creative and challenging for you, then that would be my why. And in terms of a new collaborator, I have a same why. What's the reason for bringing in a new collaborator? Is it because I don't know, you and your costume designer do the same things every time and you can't think of something else and you want to try something else? Or is it the relationship broke down? Or for me, often it's about, if it's a new collaborator, it's sometimes about something I've never done before and don't know how to do. And so I need expertise of stuff that I can't do, like when I'm first working with a costume designer or a cinematographer or whatever it might be. Or sometimes it's when I've seen somebody's work and just been, really digging what they do, and just kind of feel a kinship of some sort, and then, need to approach them and just have a chat and, instinctively getting a sense that there's something that, a connection that you're looking for that is probably something you're looking for in your work. So it could be, I feel like it's the why, really, rather than necessarily thinking of it as existing or new collaborators. I don't know how you feel about that, Gary, but
yeah, I quite like working with new people because they bring a whole fresh new approach to the work and might come up with new ways of thinking about things which I've never done before. I think there is a danger of working with the same people all the time, that it can get stale. A relationship can get stale, I think, and that's when we need to kind of shake things up a bit and introduce new elements. But I think for me it depends, exactly like Hetain, it depends what kind of work I'm creating and what I need and the style of work that I'm trying to create. I tend to then bring people in that can facilitate that, really. But also I tend to work with people that are good or that have a really sound knowledge of their work and their practice, and that can that challenge themselves and that push boundaries and that keeping their practice fresh. So even though I might have worked with someone for quite a long time, it's still very exciting because they're also pushing their art form as much as I try and push mine. And it's never a comfortable journey. We never sit comfortable. We always think about how can we make this more difficult for ourselves. It's ridiculous. But yeah, and that's what excites me about making work, is putting up challenges in front of us and going, well, how do we navigate our way around this? We like to experiment with things. So I do welcome new collaborators in, but they've got to be up for doing all of that. And again, I'm quite clear about what my work is and what I want to achieve and what it has got to say to the world. So as long as they can understand that, then yeah, I'm really up for working with new people all the time.
So they're all of our questions.
Great. Brilliant. Well, it's now 20 to 8. We've gone 10 minutes over, but that was amazing. Hetain, thank you so much for that. That was a brilliant hour chat.
An absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed that.
It was really brilliant. And I hope that's okay for everyone. I hope everyone got something out of that. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do keep checking out GCC Digital. We've got 5 weeks of activity, 1 week every month between September and January. And next month, October, we're going to be looking at duet work. We're going to be looking at my piece, Two Men and a Michael, and also comedy in dance. So look out for that. Lots of classes, talks, discussions, and workshops for everybody to join in. So check it out at www.gccdigital.co.uk.